Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am Asma, a second year medical student. How's everything going? I hope ERP is treating you all well. So, inshallah, today we will talk about the hormonal changes in pregnancy. Bismillah. So, this is a small lecture, very easy, inshallah. It talks about pregnancy and the different hormones that affect pregnancy and gestation, etc. So, first of all, we need to understand how human reproduction happens. There are different steps. First is internal insemination, internal fertilization, gestation, parturition. So, today we are going to focus on the gestation and the internal fertilization and the gestation parts of pregnancy, inshallah. So in order to first understand, let's talk the hormones. Let's talk about the different stages. So there's actually a difference between pregnancy and gestation. So pregnancy is the state of the mother being pregnant. It starts from conception until the birth of the baby. But gestation is the state of the embryo or the fetus from growing all the way until it becomes a big baby. So this is what we call gestation. So gestation happens when the mother is pregnant. So these are two different terms, inshallah. Let's talk about. Okay. So now let's talk about the placenta. Even though not much questions will come from this, because this is mainly anatomy heavy. But to understand the rest of the physiology part of the lecture, we need to understand what is the placenta. So placenta has two parts. One is the embryos part, which is called the chorion or the chorion frondosum. As you can see over here, it's the dark orange one, which is coming from the embryo. And the second part is the decidua, or the part from the mother. And this is the light orange part that you can see over here. So there are two parts to placenta. One is the chorion, or called as chorion frondosum. Only this part is called chorion frondosum. The one that has finger-like projections is called chorion frondosum. And the other part that is connected to the mother is called the decidua. Okay, and the decidua comes from the endometrial tissue. Now, this together form the placenta. Now, why is placenta very important? Because that is the key for transfer of gases, nutrients, wastes, etc. Okay, and in order to properly facilitate this process, we need to have endocrine systems or hormones acting at different parts to ensure that everything is working properly. So these endocrine systems come from the mother, come from the fetus itself, and come from the placenta. So these three things can secrete hormones, which ultimately aid in the process of gestation. Okay? Now let's start with the stages of pregnancy. Let's start with fertilization. Okay. So we told that it is internal insemination, internal fertilization. But before fertilization can happen, we need to understand the stages that happen before. So the sperm that is inseminated is like this. So it has an acrosome cap with enzymes. It has this condensed nucleus, and then it has this body with lots of mitochondria, and then it has this big tail. Okay, so this is how the sperm looks like. Whereas the oocyte or the ovum, that is the ovum, has first of all this corona radiata, which is a lot of cells. And then on top of that, we also have cumulus oophorus or cumulus cells, which is not shown in this diagram though. But there are also cells surrounding the ovum. And then we have the zona pellucida, the gray structure over here. It does not have any cells, but it's like a thick jelly-like thing that surrounds the ovum. And then this is the ovum itself with the nucleus. Very important to note that this cell is called the oocyte, and the oocyte has a nucleus. And this nucleus is stuck at metaphase 2 of meiosis 2. So it hasn't finished meiosis fully. So it's just in metaphase 2. Okay? Whereas the sperm has finished everything and is now haploid. Okay. Now what happens when the sperm enters? So the sperm enters and it is entering into the fallopian tube. In this stage, we have a process called as capacitation, which is very, very, very important. So what happens in capacitation is three main steps. First, as you can see, this is the sperm. This is how it looks like as soon as it enters. And then it undergoes some changes called capacitation, and then it becomes like this. So what are these changes? First, as you can see, these yellow dots are cholesterol. that are present in the plasma membrane of the sperm. These get removed. So the cholesterol gets removed, and then there are these holes, you could say, in the plasma membrane, and the plasma membrane becomes more fluid. So this allows for more exchange of substances outside and inside the sperm cell, and also some receptors can go and stick outside the cell because there's no cholesterol blocking it anymore. So that's the first stage. Cholesterol is removed. Okay. The second thing is glycoproteins are also removed from the plasma membrane. And this is essential. Why? Because with the glycoproteins, the sperm cannot bind to the ovum. So in order to bind to the ovum, we have to remove the glycoproteins, and that's the second step. So glycoproteins are removed, okay? That's the second step. The third step is membrane changes. So as I said, the cholesterol gets removed, and things can come outside and inside the cell. And this allows for ions to move outside and inside the sperm cell. And this creates a charge across the membrane. And this charge is called membrane potential, okay? And this membrane potential now allows calcium to come inside. So when calcium comes inside the cell, the calcium has a specific function inside the cell. It phosphorylates proteins. Now, what is phosphorylation of proteins? It's just like adding a phosphate group to the protein. And this activates many proteins and makes the protein do its function, okay? So once the proteins are phosphorylated, the sperm becomes more motile, or it can move more faster, okay? And second thing, it can kick off the acrosome reaction, which is the enzymes present in the acrosomal cap gets activated, okay? So capacitation has three steps. First is removing cholesterol, which changes the fluidity of the membrane. Second is removing glycoprotein so that it can get attached. Third is membrane changes, which allows calcium inside. This calcium phosphorylates proteins, and now the sperm moves faster and acrosome reaction can start. Okay, so this is capacitation. Okay, now the sperm has gone to the ampulla. Okay, and now it meets the ovum. So over here, what happens is that the sperm head has some enzyme called as hyaluronidase enzyme. Okay, so this enzyme acts on the covering of the ovum. Now, what was the outermost covering? We called it as, okay, we called it as the cumulus oophoris, or the cumulus cells, and the corona radiata, which I've drawn over here with purple, okay? So the hyaluronidase enzyme, which is present on the sperm cell, breaks this part of the corona radiata. And now it has passed the first gate, the corona radiata. Okay. Now, then we talked about how the acrosome reaction has started, right? Now, the acrosome reaction is when the enzymes in the acrosomal cap, that is over here blue color, those get activated. Now, those enzymes that get activated now digest the zona pellucida layer. Okay, so, okay, now we have crossed the corona radiata, we've crossed the zona pellucida. One thing I forgot to mention is the acrosome cap has the acrosin enzyme, and this acrosin enzyme is the one that digests the zona pellucida, or the green layer. Okay, now we've passed two barriers. Okay, let's go to the third barrier. Okay, the third barrier is the plasma membrane of the ovum, or the oocyte itself. Okay, so this is the plasma membrane of the oocyte. So now the sperm has this protein sticking on its surface. Okay, this protein is called isomo 1. Okay, this is isomo 1 protein. This isomo 1 protein interacts, or like recognizes, the Juno protein of the plasma membrane of the oocyte. Okay, now isomo recognizes Juno. Okay, and now the sperm is ready to fuse with the oocyte. So there are three steps that are happening over here. Okay. So that's what I told over here. Again, what are the three steps? First, we have the hyaluronidase enzyme that breaks the corona radiata. The second is the acrosin enzyme and the acrosomal reaction that breaks the zona pellucida. Third is the interaction between the isomo 1 and the Juno of the egg, and therefore fertilization or fusion can happen. Okay, now the sperm has fused with the egg, or the oocyte. Okay, now what happens is that all the contents inside the sperm are released inside the cytoplasm of the oocyte. Okay, now we talked about um, the we talked about the nucleus of the oocyte. It was stuck in metaphase 2 phase, right? Now, as soon as the fusion happens, the oocyte nucleus, which was in metaphase 2, finishes entire meiosis 2 and releases the second polar body. Okay? Now, once that polar body is released, the nucleus, the remaining nucleus, is ready to fuse with the sperm's nucleus. And that's what's happening over here. You can see the sperm's nucleus and the oocyte's nucleus fusing. Okay? Okay, now what are these black dots spilling out from the sperm cytoplasm into the oocyte? So these are called as phospholipase C zeta. Okay, so these are certain enzymes that are coming from the sperm cytoplasm into the oocyte. They have certain special and very, very important functions, okay? So what did this phospholipase C zeta do is that they go and cleave PIP2, which is present on the plasma membrane, into DAG and IP3. It's not very important to know, but ultimately the IP3 goes and triggers calcium release from this yellow color endoplasmic reticulum, and calcium comes outside the endoplasmic reticulum, and now the cytoplasm of the oocyte is filled with calcium. And I said calcium has very important functions whenever it comes inside the cell. Now, the calcium, once it's inside the cell over here, it pushes these blue color granules, which are called cortical granules, outside. And once these cortical granules goes outside, they make the zona pellucida more thick. Okay, so let's revise what's happening. The sperm fuses with the oocyte. It spills whatever's inside the cytoplasm both the cytoplasms fuse, okay? And the metaphase 2 nucleus completes its meiosis, and now the nucleus of the sperm and the nucleus of the oocyte fuse. Okay, now there are enzymes called phospholipase zeta spilling from the sperm into the cytoplasm. These trigger calcium release from the endoplasmic reticulum. The calcium pushes cortical granules outside, and these cortical granules make the zona pellucida layer, as you can see over here, really, really thick. Now, why does zona pellucida need to be thick? This is because we need to prevent polyspermy, because we don't want another sperm's nucleus entering inside and then mixing with this nucleus that's already over here and making the oocyte into 3N or something, and that is really lethal, meaning if polyspermy happens, it's going to die. It's not going to become a successful pregnancy. So that is why it is very important to prevent polyspermy. Okay. So after the two nuclei fuse together, we have the zygote. Okay. Now what happens in the zygote? The zygote, as you can see, is taken, as you said, fertilization happens in the ampulla, which is this region. And then the zygote travels in the oviduct for 6 days after fertilization. Okay. And then it travels and comes to this endometrial lining and implants or fuses with the endometrial lining, which is called implantation. And this happens in the 21st day of the menstrual cycle. Okay, that's what happens. Also, the remaining corpus luteum is the one that secretes progesterone, which prevents myometrial contraction and prevents menstruation, so that there is successful implantation. So when we talked about the corpus luteum, right? The corpus luteum is viable only for some period. It's viable and secretes progesterone only for some time, and this time frame is called window of receptivity. In this period only can successful implantation occur. And in this period, we have also spiral arteries, which are arteries that come from the endometrium and they're really rich in blood. And the spiral arteries are also present in the endometrium. Okay, so this is called window of receptivity, the ideal time frame when the zygote can implant into the endometrium. Okay. Okay. So now what happens is that the zygote, as I said, it moves through the oviduct or the fallopian tube. But while moving on, it divides. Okay? It divides continuously to form something called as a morula, and then after a morula, it becomes a blastomere. A blastomere is like, you could say like a blueberry, which is full of cells. Okay, now what happens is that this blastomere takes in fluid inside and has this cavity called as a blastocele. And this is blastocele, this dark green thing, and surrounding that we have the blastomere. So this is blastomere, which has a water-filled cavity inside called blastocele. An entire thing is called as blastocyst because it has a cyst-filled cavity inside. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So this is what happens, and this blastocyst travels and enters into the endometrium in the window of receptivity and fuses with the endometrium. Okay. The area that fuses with the endometrium is the embryonic pole, or the pole where these cells are present. So as I said, this is the blastocyst. The blastocyst has two layers of cells. First is the inner cell mass, and outside we have is the trophoblast. Okay. Now, the outside trophoblast are responsible for forming the future placenta, and the inner cell mass is the one that forms the future embryo. Okay, so the side in which the future embryo cells or the inner cell mass cells are there, that side is the one that is called embryonic pole, and that is the same side with which it joins with the endometrium. So this is called as embryonic pole. Okay, so we've joined, and now the trophoblast divides to form two layers, which is called the side trophoblast, which is present outside, and the syncytial trophoblast, which forms villi or like finger-like projections. Okay, now we have a very good implantation that has happened. So this was what happens in the side of the embryo. So that's what's written over here. And after that, there is something that happens in the side of the mother or the side of the endometrium itself, and this is called decidualization. So when I talked about placenta, we came to know that there are two layers of placenta or two sides. One is the embryo side, which is called chorion, and the second is the decidua, which is the mother side. So we talked all this time in so we talked the syncytial trophoblast and the cytotrophoblast. Both of these are forming the chorion of the placenta. Now we're going to talk about how the decidua is made, and the decidua is nothing but the change in the endometrium that is lining the chorion. So for example, the cells, the pink color cells that are surrounding over here, these undergo a change. What is that change? These cells fill with glycogen. And once these cells fill with glycogen, they're called decidua because they are now capable of transferring nutrients from this side to that side and so on. Okay, so we have the chorion and we have the decidua. And the formation of decidua is called decidualization. It's something that's really, just know about it. That's it. Okay. Now, the syncytial trophoblast, once it forms, it secretes a very important hormone called as human chorionic gonadotropin. So, as I said, there's something called this window of receptivity in which the corpus luteum stays alive, after which the corpus luteum dies. And if the corpus luteum dies, we all know that menstruation occurs and everything that's present in the womb is going to get discharged. We do not want this to happen. We have a very successful implantation, and now the syncytial trophoblast is going to secrete human chorionic gonadotropin. This HCG goes and keeps the corpus luteum alive and makes sure that it continuously secretes progesterone until 10th week of pregnancy, because after the 10th week of pregnancy the placenta takes over the job of secreting progesterone and keeping the placenta and pregnancy alive. Okay, so as I said, the implantation has happened and the placenta has become proper. Okay, now once the placenta has become proper, we have exchange of gases by diffusion, because gases are easy to pass, so they just pass by simple diffusion, just come, enter, and enter into the embryo. Glucose that has to cross via GLUT1 transporter, and this is facilitated transport, meaning there is a protein on the mother side that catches the glucose, and then it flips, and then it leaves the glucose in the embryo side. So this is what we call facilitated transport that happens by a special protein called GLUT1. Amino acids are transported by active transport. It's the same thing in which a protein catches amino acids from the mother side, and then ATP is used, and then it flips, and then what happens is that the amino acids are released into the baby side. So this is active transport. And last thing by which transportation occurs is pinocytosis or transcytosis. This is when there is a pinching of the cell membrane with contents, and that contents inside will have iron, transferrin, or other substances, and then that vesicle will fuse with the embryo side and then release all of its contents in the embryo side as well. So these are the four different types we need to know. So as I said, these are the things that these gases, glucose, amino acids, come from the blood of the mother. Okay, and this is very important because the blood of the mother comes from, as I said, the spinal arteries. But the spinal arteries now, once implantation has happened, break down and they release blood into the fluid, into the space that is present between the villi of the chorion. So I'll tell you, or the lacuna. So I'll show you what's happens. Okay, I'll draw it for you guys. Okay, so what happens is, okay, maybe I cannot draw. Okay, yeah. So what happens is that this is the placenta. Okay, this is the decidual of the mother, and this is the baby side. Okay, so this is the mother, and this is the baby side. Okay, so the baby side has what you call the chorion. Okay, very good. We have the villi of the chorion, and this villi of the chorion is the one that is going to accept all of the nutrients from the mother side. Okay, but the mother side also has some villi or finger-like projections that is like this, and so this is the villi-like projections from the mother side. Now, the spinal arteries that are present, for example, if these are the spinal arteries, they break and they release all of the blood in here. So all of these white spaces that you see all over here in between the villi, over there, it's filled with blood from the spinal arteries that are breaking down, and this is what we call lacuna or lakes filled with blood. And from this blood is what we have exchange of gases, nutrients, and even waste products. Okay, so this is what happens. Again, one more important thing is, oh yes, these are normal villi of the chorion, the one that I drew over here. Another important chorionic villi are called as, um, what was the name again? Oh yeah, they're called as, I forgot the name word exactly. Oh yeah, they're called as, so what they do is that they have a hook over here and they bind to the maternal placenta. So they're responsible for proper binding. Okay, so this is what happens. So again, in order to sum up what happens is that there is chorion. They have finger-like projections, which take blood from these spaces called lacuna. Okay, and they take what nutrients, waste, and transfer waste products, etc. And they also have another type of villi called as the hook villi. Okay, okay. These formation of placenta and all of these minute details are actually not important for the exam. Uh, but it's important for us to just know um, that these things exist so that we can understand and relate the hormonal changes, but they're not going to be assessed from the physiology part, inshallah. So as I said again, so this is how it looks like, way better than my drawing. So this is the part of the baby. So this is the part of the mother, and this is the part of the baby. So these parts that I'm showing over here are the chorion, and these are the chorionic villi. And these is the mother's parts of the decidua and the decidual villi over here. Okay, and we have blood, that all those white spaces that you see over here are actually filled with blood in reality, and the cells take the villi takes in blood, and we have proper exchange of materials. Okay, now we come to the important part of the lecture, hormones. This is what we are going to be assessed for you guys, and this is what is a bit tricky. So inshallah, let's break it down. Okay, so why do we need hormones, and from where do these hormones come? So as I mentioned, the hormones come from the mother, from the placenta, and from the baby itself. So the first ever hormone that is produced is from the syncytial trophoblast, and this produces most of the hormones as well. And why do we need those hormones? We need the hormones so that the pregnant state of the uterus is maintained. We do not want any menstruation to occur, so we want progesterone to be there. Second is, it stimulates maternal breast growth, and it stimulates the growth of the ducts, the lobulo-alveolar duct. For example, I'll show you what. So if this is, okay, if this is the breast, okay, so these are called as lobules, the different things, and these things are called as alveoli. So this is what happens. This growth is stimulated by the hormones too. And the hormones again have other functions like adapting the mother's body to support the growing fetus, and also regulating the fetal growth and regulating the timing of birth, inshallah. Okay. SubhanAllah, it's so great, right? Okay, now let's talk about human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG. So this human chorionic gonadotropin is the first hormone to be released. Can you guess what releases it again? It is the syncytial trophoblast. Okay. But the syncytial trophoblast is not those cells are not going to be releasing progesterone for the entirety of the gestation. After 10 weeks, placenta will take over. So first 10 weeks, what releases progesterone? Syncytial trophoblast. After 10 weeks, what releases progesterone? Placenta. Okay? So what is this progesterone used for? This progesterone is, human chorionic gonadotropin. I mixed it up, sorry guys. So first 10 weeks, we have syncytial trophoblast releases HCG, and after that, placenta releases HCG. And this HCG has very important functions. So in the exam, they're going to ask you human chorionic gonadotropin, okay? What is it released from? And what are its functions? So this is the main bulk of what the exam is going to be. So HCG is released before 10 weeks by the syncytial trophoblastic cells, after 10 weeks by the placenta. What is its function? It prevents luteolysis, or the breakdown of corpus luteum, okay? It prevents luteolysis or the breakdown of corpus luteum because we want the progesterone to be there. The second function is, it's not a function, but what it does is that it has hypothyroidism in the mother by stimulating TSH receptors. TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone, which is present on the thyroid gland. And once HCG stimulates these receptors, it makes the thyroid gland grow. So that's the second function. And third one is that it causes morning sickness or the nausea and vomiting that is associated with pregnancy. Okay. And another minor function is that it also stimulates the fetal Leydig cells if the baby is a boy, and fetal adrenal cortex during the first trimester. But these are minor functions, but the major function of human chorionic gonadotropin is to prevent luteolysis, or to prevent the breakdown of corpus luteum. Okay? Okay. Now let's talk about the second hormone, progesterone. So this hormone, initially, it was produced by the syncytial trophoblast. But we know that syncytial trophoblast will not do the entire function on its own always, okay? So what it does is that now, after some time, the placenta takes over the function. So how is progesterone made in the placenta? You don't need to know the details, but just know that from cholesterol, we get progesterone in the placenta, okay? And there is one rate limiting step called, in which the star protein over here, this star protein is responsible for taking the cholesterol from the cytoplasm and transporting it inside the mitochondria. So that is the function of star protein. And so in the placenta, the cells do not need the star protein. So cholesterol freely goes inside the mitochondria, and freely we have progesterone that's made. So just imagine there is no rate limiting step over here. And so the formation of progesterone is continuously increasing throughout pregnancy. And so once the progesterone that's made in the placenta, it is released into the maternal side, and it has certain important functions in the maternal side. So what are these functions? We need to know. Again, we need to know how it is made, and we need to know its functions, okay? So it makes the corpus luteum survive and makes sure that the mature placenta is enriched with blood. Okay, so this is the main function of progesterone. So progesterone, where is it made? It is made initially by the syncytial trophoblast. Later on, it is changed, the job is taken over by placenta. Okay, so this formation of progesterone is unlimited because there is no star protein that is required. These are the main things that we need to know from progesterone. Now let's come to estrogen. So we talked about HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, and I talked about progesterone. Now let's talk about estrogen, okay? Now, in estrogen, estrogen is again not made by placenta itself. This is very important to know. Why? Because placenta does not have an enzyme called CYP17. And because it does not have this enzyme, placenta cannot make estrogen. Then how is estrogen even made? So I'll draw this for you guys, inshallah. So as I said, we need to make estrogen so that it can control effects in the mother's body. Okay, so we have, first of all, placenta. One place is placenta. Okay, so this is what happens in the placenta. Placenta cannot make estrogen by itself. We have the adrenal cortex of the baby. This is the adrenal cortex. Okay, this is the adrenal gland. And we have liver. This is the liver, again, of the baby. Okay, so this is the liver. Okay, so what happens is that from the pituitary gland, this is the pituitary gland, again, of the baby. All of this is happening in the baby's side. And once the pituitary gland releases what you call ACTH, or the adrenocorticotropic hormone. This ACTH that is released now has two effects. First, it goes to adrenal gland. Once it goes to the adrenal gland, the fetal ACTH from the pituitary gland, it goes to the adrenal gland. And once it goes to the adrenal gland, it stimulates the release of something called this DHEAS, dihydroepiandrosterone sulfate. Okay, so now it releases DHEAS. Now, once DHEAS, or the dihydroepiandrosterone sulfate, is released, it goes to two places. One, it goes to the placenta, and another, it goes to the liver. Now, first look at what happens in the placenta. In the placenta, this DHEAS is now converted into estrogen products. The estrogen is like a group name for all the different products. So what are the products that are converted in the placenta? We have the estradiol and we have the estrone that are converted. So we have estradiol and estrone that are converted over here directly. Another thing is called estriol, and that is converted in a bit of loop. So once this DHEAS is made, it comes to the liver, and in the liver, it's hydroxylated to make what you call hydroxylated DHEAS, or hydroxy DHEAS. Now, this hydroxy DHEAS is then brought back to the placenta, and once it is brought back to the placenta, it is converted to another estrogen compound called estriol. Okay. So again, this is a bit tricky, but it's really easy to know. So first, estrogen is not made by the placenta itself. The pituitary gland of the baby secretes ACTH. This ACTH goes to the adrenal cortex, or the adrenal gland, and stimulates the release of DHEAS. Okay, and once DHEAS is released, it goes to two places. First is the placenta, and second is the liver. Once it goes to the placenta, it is converted into estrogen and estradiol directly. And to convert it, and then once it goes to the liver, it is converted into hydroxy DHEAS, and this hydroxy DHEAS then goes back to the placenta and is converted into estriol. So this is the way in which estrogen is made inside the baby. It's not made completely by the placenta, it's made by three places. First is the pituitary gland stimulating the adrenal gland, and then it goes to the placenta and the liver. Okay. So this is how it's made. Now let's talk about the functions of estrogen. These are important functions to remember. So I hope you guys can remember, inshallah. First is that it increases utero-placental flow, meaning there is more blood coming to the embryo. Okay, number one, more blood for the embryo. Second is it enhances LDL receptor expression in syncytial trophoblast. So if you think about it, estrogen, in order to make more estrogen, progesterone, all of the hormones, we need steroid. These are all steroid hormones, and all steroid hormones come from cholesterol, and that is why we need more LDL to enter into the embryonic space, and that is why more LDL receptors is required. So estrogen increases the blood flow, increases LDL receptor, induces prostaglandin and oxytocin receptors, but this happens later on in pregnancy because these help in parturition. So prostaglandin and oxytocin receptors. And the fourth thing is that it increases the growth and development of the mammary glands. Now, there was one more hormone that induces the development of the mammary glands. Can you think about it? What was it? Can you think about it? Yes, so it was... Okay, yeah, it was estrogen itself. We'll talk about that later on. I haven't covered it yet. Okay, so estrogen is the one that we were talked about. Sorry, guys. So estrogen is the one that we talked about. This is the one that induces the development of mammary glands. And then the fifth function is maternal pituitary prolactin secretion. Maternal pituitary prolactin secretion. Why do we need prolactin? Again, this is going to induce the growth of mammary glands. So we have 5 functions of estrogen. Very important. First is blood flow. Increases blood flow. Second is LDL receptor, because we want more cholesterol. Third is prostaglandin oxytocin receptors, again to aid in birth. Fourth is the development of mammary glands. Fifth is making a pituitary, the mother's pituitary, secrete more prolactin. So that, again, we have growth of mammary glands. So this is the function of estrogen. Again, how is estrogen made? It's made from 3 places. It's made from, first, the DHEAS is made from the adrenal gland, which goes to the placenta, which is converted into estrone and estradiol. And then some of the DHEAS goes to the liver. And in the liver, it gets converted into hydroxy DHEAS, and then from the hydroxy DHEAS, which goes back to the placenta and gets converted into estriol. Okay, now we finished estrogen. So we've completed HCG, we completed progesterone, and we completed estrogen. Now let's talk about human placental lactogen. So as the name suggests, this is lactogen. Okay, so we have a lot of information that comes from the lactogen word itself. This hormone is similar to GH, or growth hormone, and prolactin, both structurally and functionally. Why? Because it induces the growth of the baby and induces the growth of the mammary glands, and also it changes the metabolism of the mother itself. We'll see how. And it is similar to prolactin. Why? Because it is making the mammary glands again grow. Okay. So this is human placental lactogen. Now, what are the functions? We don't need to know how it's made, which is very good, but we need to know how, what are its functions, okay? So it has three main functions. First is decreasing the maternal insulin sensitivity. What does this mean? This means that even though there is insulin in the mother, the body cannot use the insulin to store the glucose. So there is more increased glucose in the blood circulating. Why do we need more glucose in the blood? So that there is more glucose available for the baby itself. So this is the first function of human placental lactogen. Second is decrease maternal glucose utilization. So whenever there's increased glucose in the blood of the mother itself, the mother might tend to use those glucose for their purposes, but this does not happen because this is inhibited by the human placental lactogen. And when this is inhibited, more glucose is available for the fetus to grow, right? So this is what happens. And the third thing is increasing lipolysis. So now we made sure that the mother is not using glucose. So what can the mother use? The mother can use fatty acids. And this is done by lipolysis, in which the cells break down fat and release fatty acids. And now more fatty acids are there in the blood, which is easy for the mother to use. And there's more glucose available for the fetus. Okay, but in case that the mother is fasting and there is no glucose in the blood, then the embryo can use, or the fetus can use, ketones, which is again coming from the free fatty acids. Okay, so we talked about four important hormones. We talked about estrogen, we talked about progesterone, we talked about human placental lactogen, and we talked about human chorionic gonadotropin. Okay, it's important to know their functions. Now let's talk about a summary. So again, the fetal, again, just know that DHEAS is the one that stimulates placenta to make estrogen, and the estrogen again stimulates prolactin, so that we have in mammary gland growth. The placenta also secretes something called as corticotropin releasing hormone, and this goes to the maternal side and releases cortisol, which is a stress hormone, right? And then the placenta also releases human placental lactogen and progesterone. All of these four hormones have effects on the mother, which is insulin resistance, meaning the mother cannot store glucose and there's more glucose in the blood. Again, there's something called hyperinsulinemia written over here, and hyperinsulinemia means that the body of the mother is making more insulin. I mean, we can understand this. Why? Because the pancreas thinks that, okay, the mother is not able to use the insulin, let's make more insulin. So that's what there is hyperinsulinemia. And also there's more glucose in the blood. Again, these that's one function, and that's a collective function of these hormones. And the second function is proteolytic, or to break down proteins so that there's more amino acids available for the fetus. And again, there's more breakdown of fat, so that more free fatty acids are there for the mother to use. So these are the functions of their different hormones. Okay. Now let's talk about the different maternal changes that happen. So let's talk about the pituitary gland. Okay. Um, Now I have a quiz for you guys. There was this one hormone that increases the growth of pituitary gland, and because it wants to increase prolactin secretion. Can you guess what that is? Okay, so that was estrogen. Okay, so estrogen is the one that acts on the pituitary gland to increase more prolactin. So whenever there's more demand, the pituitary gland grows in size, and that's why it increases in size. But as you can see, the pituitary gland lies just above the optic nerve and just close to it. So when it increases size, it can compress the optic nerve, and this happens usually in the second or third trimester because of the increase in size. And this can lead to maybe dizziness or vision problems, the increase in pituitary size. Okay. But again, whenever this increased size of the pituitary, it means that it needs more blood supply. So whenever there is more blood loss during parturition or birth of the baby, this means that there is less blood available for the pituitary, and so the pituitary cells can undergo ischemia and necrosis. And this situation is called as Sheehan's syndrome. It's kind of important to know what is Sheehan's syndrome. Sheehan's syndrome is when there is ischemic infarct, ischemia, and death of the pituitary, because the pituitary is really big in size and does not have enough blood because of overbleeding that happens in during parturition. That is the first endocrine change that happens in the mother. Increased pituitary size. The second thing is a thyroid size. The thyroid also increases in size because it has to increase the T4 and T3 levels in the mother's body. Again, how is this induced? Estrogen, very important hormone. The estrogen induces the thyroid to increase in size. Also, the estrogen goes to the liver and makes sure that the liver increases the production of something called as thyroxine binding globulin. So what is this thyroxine binding globulin? Thyroxine binding globulin binds to these T4 and T3 hormones. So for example, there's a lot of T4, T3 in the circulating in the blood, but they cannot act on the mother itself. Why? Because they are bound by this globulin. So even though there is increased levels of T4, T3 in the blood, if you're going to check the levels of T4, T3 by a blood test, it will still show normal because most of them are bound by this protein called as thyroxine binding globulin. Now, why are thyroxine binding globulin increased in the mother who is pregnant? Because of estrogen, which acts on the liver. Okay? So that was endocrine changes. Other endocrine changes that we need to know are respiratory changes, cardiovascular changes, etc. But very, very important to know is the gestational diabetes. Gestational diabetes is very important to know and high yield for the exam. So what is gestational diabetes and how is it caused? Okay, so we talked about human placental lactogen, if you remember, and let's go and revisit the functions of human placental lactogen. And we talked about insulin sensitivity resistance. Insulin resistance, usually if there's in a normal human, if a person has insulin resistance, we call it as diabetes. Okay, but in this pregnant mother, there is because of human placental lactogen, there is insulin resistance, and this is what we call as gestational diabetes, or the diabetes that happens in the mother because the baby is being growing during the gestational phase, and this happens why? Because of human placental lactogen. Again, this is very important, again, so that we can shift the metabolism of the mother to fat so that the embryo has more glucose, right? And this is called glucose sparing effect. And there's even hyperinsulinemia because the pancreas starts secreting more insulin, and this leads to beta cell hyperplasia because the pancreas wants to increase the insulin secretion, so they start growing more beta cells. Okay, usually the gestational diabetes the gestational diabetes resolve after pregnancy, but sometimes they can continue as diabetes even after pregnancy. Okay, so this is all about the lecture, inshallah. Thank you so much. I hope you guys understood. If you guys have any doubt, like maybe in any of this lecture or maybe in from different parts of the lecture, alhamdulillah, you can come and ask me, and I've linked my WhatsApp number in the front, and inshallah it will be helpful for you guys. Please scan the QR code, and I hope that your ERP exam goes well. All the best, and thank you so much.